Let me show you what you couldn't see while you were standing inside that relationship, too close to recognize the shape of what was actually happening around you. You saw someone who made you laugh sometimes, who said the right things at the right moments, who felt familiar enough to call love. I saw the pattern underneath the surface. I saw the small ways your voice got quieter every time you disagreed with them. I saw how you started asking permission for things you never used to ask permission for. I saw the version of you that apologized first, even when you weren't the one who caused the hurt. I saw the future that pattern was building. Not all at once, not in some dramatic collapse, but slowly, the way water erodes stone over years, without anyone noticing until the shape is gone. I saw a version of you 5 years from now, 10 years from now, still shrinking, still apologizing. Still wondering when you lost the parts of yourself that used to feel so certain. I was not going to let you live that life. You keep thinking this was about them being a bad person. It wasn't that simple, and I'm not going to pretend it was, because I don't deal in cheap comfort. Some of what you shared was real. Some of the laughter was genuine. Some of the comfort you felt in their presence was not manufactured. But real is not the same as right. And comfortable is not the same as good for you. I can love someone, and still refuse to let them stay in a place that was slowly costing you your peace. I removed a future disaster from your life. Not a small inconvenience. Not a minor incompatibility you could have worked through with enough patience. A disaster. The kind that doesn't announce itself with a single dramatic moment, but instead arrives quietly, one compromise at a time. Until you wake up one day and don't recognize the person staring back at you in the mirror. I saw the arguments that were coming, the ones that would have started over something small, and ended somewhere you never intended to go. I saw the resentment that would have built in both directions, slow and silent, the kind that doesn't explode, but instead just sits in a house until the air itself feels heavy. I saw a version of your children, if that future had gone forward. Growing up watching two people who stopped choosing each other, years before they stopped pretending. I would rather give you this ache now, than let you carry that weight for decades. You keep grieving what you thought you had. I need you to also grieve what you were spared, because both of those things are true at the same time. You can miss someone, and still be grateful you're not living the life that relationship would have eventually become. Those two feelings are allowed to sit in the same chest, without canceling each other out. I know this is hard to accept while the wound is still fresh. Healing rarely arrives on the timeline we want it to. But I need you to know, even now, even in the rawest part of this grief, that I did not take something good away from you out of cruelty. I removed something that was quietly dangerous, wrapped in a familiar shape. Because you couldn't see the danger, from where you were standing inside it. I want to be even more specific, because vague comfort has never been what you needed from me. You needed the truth, even the parts that sting a little, on the way in. There was a version of this relationship where you spent years quietly convincing yourself that the good moments outweighed the growing unease. Because the good moments were real, and you didn't want to betray something real by walking away from it. That is one of the hardest kinds of endings to accept, harder in some ways than a relationship built entirely on obvious harm. When someone hurts you clearly and consistently, leaving eventually becomes easier, almost obvious. But when someone hurts you gently, quietly, in ways wrapped inside affection, you spend years defending them, even to yourself. Because the hurt doesn't look like hurt. It looks like love, that simply needs more patience. I watched you extend that patience for far longer than most people would have. I watched you give explanations for behavior that never should have needed explaining. I watched you shrink your expectations, calling it flexibility, when really you were slowly negotiating away pieces of what you actually needed, in order to keep the peace. That negotiation was costing you more than you ever let yourself admit, even in your own private thoughts. I did not remove this relationship because you failed at loving well. I removed it because you were loving well, consistently, sacrificially, and it was not being met with the same effort in return. Love that only flows in one direction eventually empties the person doing all the giving, no matter how much natural capacity for love they started with. I was not willing to watch that happen to you, for another decade. Consider, too, the version of your future health this decision protected. The body remembers what the mind tries to explain away. The chronic tension in your shoulders, the trouble sleeping, the way your stomach used to tighten before certain conversations, none of that was random. Your body was keeping score, long before your mind was willing to admit what the relationship was actually costing you physically. Not just emotionally. I was not going to let that slow toll continue building, for years you'll never get back. I also want you to consider the people around that relationship, the ones you may have started distancing yourself from without fully noticing. The friend you stopped calling as often, because every conversation eventually circled back to explaining or defending choices you were tired of explaining. The family member you stopped confiding in, because their concerned questions felt like an accusation you weren't ready to face. Relationships that are quietly wrong for you, rarely stay contained to just the two people inside them. They ripple outward, thinning the other connections in your life, isolating you a little more with each passing month, until the only voice you're really listening to, belongs to the one person whose opinion had started to matter more than everyone else's combined. I removed this relationship in part to give you back access to those other voices, the ones who loved you long before this relationship began, and will continue loving you long after tonight. This is the part where I ask you to trust me with something small, but not small to me. If you're ready to stop grieving a version of your life I already protected you from, and start walking toward the one I'm actually building for you, subscribe right now. As your way of saying you're choosing to trust the hand that closed that door, instead of resenting it. I want to take you back through the small moments, the ones that felt insignificant when they happened, because I was speaking to you through every single one of them, and you didn't yet have the language to understand what I was saying. Remember the night you cried in the bathroom with the water running so no one would hear you? You told yourself it was a bad day. It wasn't a bad day. It was your spirit trying to warn you about a pattern your mind hadn't caught up to recognizing yet. Remember the friend who gently asked if you were okay, and you brushed it off with a smile that didn't reach your eyes. I put that friend in your path on purpose, hoping the question would plant a seed you'd eventually let grow. Remember every time you felt a strange resistance before a conversation you needed to have, a tightness in your stomach before you even walked into the room. That wasn't anxiety. That was discernment, the kind I built into you before you were even born, trying to get your attention. You called it overthinking. You called it being too sensitive. You called it a dozen different names that all led you back to doubting yourself, instead of trusting what your spirit already knew. I was never trying to make you doubt yourself. I was trying to help you listen. There were dreams, too. You don't remember all of them. But some mornings you woke up with an unexplainable heaviness that followed you through the whole day, a residue from something I showed you while you slept, that your conscious mind couldn't fully translate. Some of those dreams were me preparing your heart, softening the ground, so that when this ending finally came, some small part of you wouldn't be entirely blindsided by it, even if the rest of you still ached at the arrival. I also want to address something you've been almost afraid to admit to yourself. There were moments, quiet and fleeting, where you felt relief mixed in with the sadness. A strange, guilty exhale in the middle of the grief. You've been pushing that feeling away, telling yourself it makes you a bad person for feeling anything other than devastation. It doesn't make you bad. It makes you honest. Some part of you knew, even before the ending arrived. That staying was costing you more than leaving ever could. I want you to stop being ashamed of that relief. It is not a betrayal of what you shared. It is confirmation that some part of you was always paying attention, even when the rest of you was too tired, too hopeful, or too in love with the idea of what could have been to fully admit what was actually happening. Here is what I want you watching for over the next several days. In the next 72 hours. Pay attention to a specific kind of clarity that arrives almost out of nowhere, usually in the quietest part of your day. A thought that isn't anxious, isn't spiraling, just simply true. A sentence that surfaces in your mind like it was placed there deliberately, something like, "I understand now," or, "that makes sense," attached to a piece of this ending you couldn't make sense of before. That clarity is me. Finishing the conversation I started with you through all those small signs you couldn't fully read at the time. You are not losing your mind by feeling multiple things at once. Grief and relief. Sadness and peace. Missing someone and knowing, somewhere underneath the missing, that this was right. All of it can exist together, and none of it cancels the rest out. I did not design healing to be a straight line, and I'm not going to pretend it is one now, just to make this easier for you to hear. I also want to talk to you about the songs. You know the ones. The songs that came on the radio at exactly the wrong moment, that made you pull over because you couldn't see the road through the tears anymore. You thought those were random, cruel coincidences, the universe rubbing salt into a wound that hadn't scarred over yet. Some of those moments were exactly that, ordinary coincidence, nothing more. But some of them, the ones that hit differently, the ones that felt almost too specific to be chance, those were mine. I was using something small and familiar to remind you that you weren't grieving alone in that car, even when it felt like the loneliest place in the world. There is another sign I want you to remember, one you might have dismissed as simple exhaustion at the time. The moments where you suddenly, unexpectedly, felt lighter for no clear reason. A walk where the air felt different. A morning where the weight on your chest lifted just slightly before settling back down. Those brief windows of lightness were previews. Small, temporary tastes of the peace that's fully available to you now, on the other side of this ending, once you stop fighting to reopen what I already closed. I know it's tempting to want proof, something concrete and undeniable, before you'll let yourself fully believe any of this. I understand that desire. Faith without any confirmation at all can feel like standing on nothing. So let me give you something to watch for. Something specific enough that you'll recognize it when it arrives. In the coming days, pay attention to an unexpected message, a small kindness from someone you weren't expecting, or a piece of information that answers a question you've been quietly carrying about this ending. That will be your confirmation, delivered in a way only you will fully understand the meaning of. There is one more sign I want to prepare you for. Because it might feel confusing when it happens if you don't already understand what it means. At some point, likely sooner than you expect, you're going to hear a piece of news about them, directly or indirectly, and it will confirm something you already suspected but couldn't prove. That confirmation is not meant to reopen the wound. It's meant to close it fully, to remove the last thread of doubt keeping you tethered to the question of whether you made the right decision. Or whether I made the right decision on your behalf. When that news arrives, let it be the final piece, not a new wound to nurse. What's already finished. Now I need to speak to something a little harder, something I've watched you do over and over again, not just in this relationship but in almost every part of your life. You have a habit of trying to fix things that were never yours to fix. You take responsibility for outcomes that were never fully in your control. And then you exhaust yourself trying to force a resolution where I already gave you an ending. I watched you draft that message again last night. The one apologizing for something you already apologized for. The one trying to reopen a conversation that doesn't need to be reopened, because reopening it isn't going to give you what you're actually looking for. You're not trying to fix the relationship. You're trying to fix the discomfort of not having closure the way you imagined it. Those are two very different things, and I need you to separate them clearly in your mind. Closure is not always a conversation. Sometimes closure is simply me telling you, directly, that it's finished, and you choosing to believe me even without the explanation you think you need from another person. I also need to correct the belief that if you had just tried a little harder, been a little more patient, been a little less yourself, it would have worked. That belief is not humility. It is a quiet form of self-punishment dressed up as accountability. You cannot fix what I already finished, and continuing to try isn't devotion. It's disobedience to the very protection I gave you. I know that word feels harsh. I'm using it on purpose, because I need you to understand the weight of what you're doing when you keep trying to reopen a door I closed for your survival. Every time you go back, even in your mind, even in a message you never send, you are asking me to reconsider a decision I made with full knowledge of what was coming. I don't make decisions like that lightly, and I'm not going to reverse this one just because the missing feels unbearable tonight. There is also a correction I need to make in how you see yourself in all of this. You've been carrying a quiet belief that you weren't enough to make them stay, that if you had been better, more understanding, less demanding, they would have chosen you the way you chose them. I need you to release that belief completely, because it is not true, and it is not what this ending was ever about. You were never the problem that needed fixing. The relationship itself was the thing that needed to end, and no amount of you becoming smaller, quieter, more agreeable would have changed that outcome, because the outcome was never dependent on your worth. It was dependent on my protection of your future. Stop measuring your value by what someone else was capable of choosing. Their inability to choose you fully says everything about their capacity in that season, and nothing about what you deserve. I don't want you spending one more night auditioning for a role I already closed the casting call on. If this is landing somewhere raw right now, if you recognize the pattern of trying to fix what was never broken on your end, type 444 into the space below. Let that number mark the moment you stopped trying to repair what I already finished, and started trusting the one who finished it on your behalf. There's one more correction I need to make, and this one might sting more than the others, because it touches something you've been avoiding looking at directly. Part of you has been holding on to this relationship not because it was right, but because letting go means facing the version of your life you don't yet have an answer for. Staying attached to the ending, even painfully, felt easier than stepping into the blank, uncertain space of not knowing what comes next. I understand that fear completely. Uncertainty is uncomfortable in a way that even a painful, familiar ache sometimes isn't. But I did not design you to live inside the comfort of familiar pain simply because the alternative feels unknown. I designed you for growth. And growth almost always requires walking through a season where you don't yet have the full picture. You do not need to see the entire staircase to trust that the next step is solid. You only need to take it. I also need to correct the way you've been comparing your timeline to everyone else's. You've watched other people move through breakups faster, seemingly recover quicker, and you've used that comparison as another stick to punish yourself with. Your grief is not a performance with a schedule. It does not run on the same clock as anyone else's. I am not measuring how quickly you heal. I am simply present with you in every single stage of it, whether that stage takes weeks or takes considerably longer than you expected. There's a final correction here, quieter than the rest, but important. You've started to believe that needing this much time to heal is a character flaw. Evidence that you're somehow weaker or more broken than people who seem to move on with ease. I want you to release that belief tonight. The depth of your grief is not a measurement of your weakness. It is a measurement of how fully you were willing to love, how completely you gave yourself to something you believed in. That capacity is not something to be ashamed of. It's the very thing that makes you capable of the kind of love I'm preparing you to receive next. The kind that will finally be met with equal depth in return. I want to close by showing you where this leads, because grief has a way of convincing you that the ending is the whole story, and I need you to see past that lie before you go to sleep tonight. There is a version of your life coming that you cannot yet imagine, not because it's too far away, but because you're still standing too close to the wreckage to see past it. In that life, you are not shrinking. You are not apologizing for taking up space in a conversation. You are not lying awake wondering if you're too much or not enough. You are simply yourself, fully, without the quiet negotiation you've been running for far longer than you realized. The love that's coming, whether through this specific person or someone entirely different I haven't introduced you to yet, will not require you to disappear in order to keep it. It will not ask you to make yourself smaller to make someone else comfortable. It will not leave you guessing at your own worth in the quiet hours when no one else is watching. I am not in the business of replacing one slow erosion with another. What I build after a real ending is always sturdier than what came before it. You are going to look back on tonight, on this exact ache you're sitting with right now. And you're going to recognize it as the night everything actually started to change, even though right now it just feels like loss. That's how I tend to work. The turning points rarely announce themselves with celebration. Most of the time they arrive disguised as the worst night of your life, and only later do you understand they were the beginning of something you couldn't have accessed any other way. I also want to speak to the specific fear sitting underneath all of this. The one you haven't said out loud yet, even to yourself. The fear that this is proof you're unlovable, that if the right person had really wanted you, they would have stayed no matter what. I need you to let that fear go completely, because it was never true, and holding on to it will only build a wall around the very love I'm bringing toward you next. Being loved correctly was never about someone staying despite everything being wrong. It's about someone staying because everything, even the hard parts, feels worth building through together. What you had was not that. What's coming is. Let yourself sleep tonight without replaying the ending one more time. Let the questions rest. I already answered them, even in the moments it felt like I was silent. You did not lose something good. You were spared something quietly devastating, and on the other side of this ache, I am already building the life your heart has been asking for. Long before you knew how to put it into words. Let me describe a little more of what's coming, not to distract you from the grief, but to give you something steady to hold on to while you walk through it. There will be a morning, not too far from now, where you wake up and realize you didn't think about the ending first thing, for the first time in longer than you can remember. It won't feel dramatic when it happens. It will feel almost quiet, almost easy to miss. And that quietness is exactly how you'll know it's real and not something you're forcing. There will be a conversation, later on, with someone new, where you find yourself speaking freely, without editing your thoughts before they leave your mouth, without bracing for a reaction that might make you feel small for saying what you actually think. You'll notice how different that feels compared to what you're used to, and in that noticing, you'll understand more fully what I was protecting you from all along. There will be a moment, maybe months from now, maybe longer, where someone asks you about this season of your life, and you'll find yourself telling the story without the same sharp ache that's sitting in your chest tonight. You'll still remember it. You'll still recognize it as difficult. But it will have become part of your story instead of the center of it, a chapter instead of the whole book. I also want to speak directly to the part of you wondering if you're capable of trusting again, of opening up again, after this. You are. Not because the fear will simply disappear, but because I will be with you as you learn to trust in a new way, one that isn't built on ignoring the warning signs I gave you before, but on actually listening to them the next time they appear. This ending was not just a protection. It was also an education. Teaching your spirit to recognize the difference between the discomfort of growth and the discomfort of harm, so you never again mistake one for the other. Somewhere down this road, when the next relationship comes, whether it's the same person returning as someone entirely changed, or someone completely new stepping into your life, you're going to recognize red flags faster than you ever have before. You're going to trust your own discomfort instead of talking yourself out of it. You're going to ask for what you need out loud, early, instead of quietly hoping the other person will simply figure it out on their own. That's not cynicism. That's wisdom, purchased at the cost of this exact night, and I don't want you to waste what it cost you by pretending you didn't learn anything from it. I want to leave you with one more image before you close your eyes tonight. Picture a garden that had one section overrun with something that looked like it belonged there. Green and familiar, but was slowly choking out everything else planted nearby. I didn't just pull a weed tonight. I made room. Room for things you haven't even planted yet, things you don't have names for, things that are going to grow taller and stronger and more nourishing than anything that section of your life has produced in years. Give that empty space time. Don't rush to fill it with something else just to avoid looking at the bare ground. Let it rest. Let me plant what I actually intend to grow there. There's a name that surfaced in your mind while I was talking about carrying weight alone, about apologizing for things that were never fully your fault. Maybe it's someone walking through their own version of this exact ache right now, convinced they did something wrong when really they were simply protected. Send this to them tonight. You'll know exactly why their face appeared the moment I mentioned it. And they may need to hear tonight exactly what you needed to hear. Let yourself sleep tonight without replaying the ending one more time. Let the questions rest. I already answered them, even in the moments it felt like I was silent. You did not lose something good. You were spared something quietly devastating, and on the other side of this ache. I am already building the life your heart has been asking for, long before you knew how to put it into words. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are simply standing at the beginning of the story I was protecting all along.